You know, when we think of royals doing a lot of good, instantly we think of people like the late and beautiful Princess Diana. Let's not forget, she did break many barriers in her short time within the British monarchy. You know, really sort of casting aside all the fears and stuff, particularly with victims of terrible diseases, and of course, more importantly, breaking barriers of hugging and touching and kissing, stuff like that. All the things that had really been sort of off record, as it were, for previous royals. And I'm not knocking Queen Elizabeth, Princess Margaret at all. I thought they were marvellous people, of course. They did so much in what they could, and it was their era, you know, very respectful, very stand back, and very stoic, simply because if they broke down, then they didn't want to make it even worse for the people they were visiting. But it's always refreshing to know that actually it's not always just one person who gets the limelight that did so much. Let me explain. Hi, good to see you today. Thank you so much for your time. Rock Hudson, you know, was an amazing guy. I met him very briefly when he came over to London on his very final visit to promote the TV soap opera show Dynasty. He was appearing at the Shepherd's Bush Empire Theatre, the BBC TV theatre, to promote the show, and already was looking quite ravaged from, of course, what we later knew to be his HIV/AIDS status. Lovely man, though, you know, very, very nice, very sweet. And it's interesting because obviously I've met many people who knew Rock from the very start, and what you got really was a guy that was totally unprepared really for fame. And like a lot of stars of that era, when they came out to big countries, you know, outside America, they had no idea just how popular they were in the world. I remember him saying to me that he realized it's all thanks to the, you know, invention of VHS video and DVD and stuff like that, because his films were now being rediscovered by a whole brand new genre of younger people, you know, the Doris Day comedies, but of course the big hits as well, All This and Heaven Too. You know, he really did have an amazing catalogue of material. Now, I remember him very young, you know, really young in fact, on TV in Macmillan and Wife. Do you remember that with Susan St. James? Brilliant series. You don't see that really repeated anymore now. Don't know why, do you? But cast your mind back. I know I often say this, ladies, but cast your mind back to 1952. Yes, I know, you weren't even born, were you? That's the thing. What I find fascinating about this is in 1952, at the Empire Leicester Square Theatre, there was an amazing premiere going on, attended by none other than the Queen, the Duke of Edinburgh, and a beautiful Princess Margaret. Margaret always features in the end, have you noticed? What's interesting here is Charlie Chaplin was one of the main stars. He was still in London, having had his premiere for Limelight the previous week, also attended by the Royals. Remember that big hit? Now, what's interesting is in the lineup was none other than Rock Hudson. And according to a very well-placed source, Princess Margaret literally was desperate to meet Rock Hudson. She had something of a crush, you know, a fangirl movie sort of girl who loved all the movie magazines of the era, picture goer, movie star, that sort of stuff. Couldn't believe a chance to actually meet him in the flesh. 6'2", I believe Rock Hudson was, and as she apparently pointed out, literally was one of the most beautiful men she'd ever met. What was interesting is in the lineup and everything like that, they did the usual formal stuff, but in the party afterwards, Princess Margaret and Rock developed something of a friendship. I would imagine so, more so that she just had something of a crush. But as another Hollywood star pointed out to me, Robert Vaughn, she kept up a good friendship with him for many years. And when he finally returned to the United Kingdom for the very last visit, as I say, to help promote the Dynasty series for Aaron Spelling, well, she knew something was clearly wrong. He'd obviously kept all of this a secret, and he had to the rest of the world. She got in touch, and literally they had a very nice conversation. Robert tells me this. Now, what's interesting about this is she knew exactly what the problem was. He said he was going for treatment, as we now know, over to Paris, but she kind of knew, you know, Princess Margaret. She didn't want to make a big deal of it because she didn't want the press to get hold of it and escalate it any more than it actually was. And apparently, you know, as I say, they sort of said there whatever they needed to say. And Robert said he was very moved by this because essentially he said that Princess Margaret was just a nice woman at heart, just a really nice, down-to-earth woman who cared about people. And if you were a friend, you remained a friend for many years to come. Sadly, as we know, we lost Rock Hudson, and Princess Margaret apparently was absolutely devastated. But as she pointed out, look at the wonderful catalogue of work that he left behind. Of course, during the memorial and stuff like that, you will have seen many different flowers from many different people. There was a wreath from, of course, Princess Margaret. He didn't have her name on it, but those that knew, according to Robert, knew. And apparently Rock Hudson could never truly get over the fact that he had such a royal fan in the Queen's sister. As he apparently pointed out to Robert, he couldn't really believe he was standing in front of the Queen. In fact, a few years before, he'd been a gasoline attendant struggling in Hollywood. And now there he was alongside some of the biggest stars in the world and the most famous woman in the world. But apparently, it was her younger sister that only had eyes for rock. Neil Sean in the very heart of London.